Last week, Square Enix invited me to be one of the first people in the world to play Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, the next chapter of the Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy, releasing worldwide on the PlayStation 5 on February 29th, 2024. In this entry, a new story unfolds as Cloud, Tifa, Aerith, Barret, and Red XIII are on a journey to track down a soldier known as Sephiroth. Even though this is the second game in the remake project, it's been created as a standalone experience, which also comes with a recap of the first game. So it's been said that newcomers will still be able to jump into this entry and play it as their first experience. As someone that played the original Final Fantasy VII on the PlayStation 1 and has consumed a lot of the media surrounding the series, I was looking forward to playing Rebirth so I could spend more time within its world and view the story from a new perspective. When I sat down to play Rebirth, those were the things I was looking forward to experiencing the most. But as I continued to play, I started to realize that compared to Final Fantasy VII Remake, where I mainly wanted to experience the Final Fantasy VII story in an updated form, it's the gameplay in Rebirth that will most likely be one of the main reasons I'll play the game. There's a lot of new or updated gameplay systems, and you'll have much more freedom compared to Remake in the way you build your party and when it comes to exploration. In this video, I'll take you through the various gameplay systems that were available in the portion of the game that I played, and I'll also be sharing information based on some of the recent announcements about Rebirth. But I will avoid discussing story-related things unless it's to set the scene or to help explain some gameplay-related information. An option to play the game in performance mode was available in the menu, but for this preview, the majority of the gameplay was captured using graphics mode. So to start things off, let me tell you more about the sections of the game that I was allowed to play. I had the choice between two demos, the first being the Mount Nibble mission where I took control of Sephiroth and a younger Cloud, while they were being escorted by a younger Tifa to investigate a malfunctioning Mako energy reactor. This was more of a story-focused demo that didn't offer much in terms of exploration, but it did give me a better look at how the main story will flow and the interactions between characters. The other demo took place in the open wilds of Junon, and this time it had more of a focus on exploration and combat. In this demo, I could take control of Cloud, Tifa, Aerith, Barret, and Red XIII to take part in a few of the activities that could be found while exploring the world. Even though this was more of an exploration-focused demo, there were still some story aspects to it, and there was even a boss battle that I could do towards the end. While playing, I was limited to a small section of the Junon region that was modified specifically for this demo. But the world map in Rebirth is said to be vast and expansive, and compared to Remake, it does seem like a lot of the focus has been put into exploration to give us the feeling of really going on a journey with Cloud and the team. There will be multiple regions within the world that we can explore, and the development team mentioned that they needed to recreate Final Fantasy VII's massive world map in a way that could also incorporate places such as towns and dungeons. And because of the size of the world, depending on the region, we'll have access to different modes of transportation, and we'll also be able to capture and ride chocobos. After capturing a chocobo, you can call it any time within that region and customize their equipment. Depending on the region you're in, you may find different types of chocobo, like sky chocobos that can fly across large environments, or mountain chocobos that can climb up and down steep slopes that have special markings. Well, at least that's how it looked in the recent trailer, but when I tried, it didn't seem to be unlocked, or maybe I just couldn't figure out how to actually climb. But all of the areas in the world are not just there to be used as part of the main story. The amount of side content in Rebirth is said to be nearly double of what is present in the main questline. We had a glimpse of this in the most recent trailer that showcased various side activities like 3D brawler or chocobo racing and G-bike battles. People that want to get the most out of Rebirth will be able to explore the world to discover new stories, battles, and find other minigames to play. And it was mentioned in an interview that it will still be possible to return to any of the regions in the world, even after the main quest moves on from that area. So you don't have to worry about leaving things behind or unfinished. And this will be made easier with the fast travel system in the game. After noticing a baby chocobo in the wild, it started running like it wanted me to follow it. After catching up with it, it showed me a chocobo stop that I could repair, and after repairing it, I was able to use it as a fast travel point. In addition to the vehicles, there are also more options for traversal while on foot. There will still be predetermined areas that you can use to climb up and down ladders and walls, or to move across narrow paths in order to access new areas. But now you can use terrain actions to climb and jump from unmarked areas to access more locations. This is a welcome change, but at first it wasn't really clear exactly how it worked, so I just ended up running into walls while trying to get to a materia that was on a ledge just out of reach. The only reason I realized that there must be a way to get up there was because I saw the other characters climbing up on their own without me, and then I eventually noticed the terrain action prompt at the bottom left of the screen, and after pressing it, it finally let me climb up and grab the materia. There was also hidden treasure and items in the world that could be found. Some of them could be reached by swimming to distant areas. It was also possible to use a higher location to look back at areas I previously traveled through, just to check if I missed anything. Various materials could also be gathered while exploring. In the menu, these materials can be placed into the item transmuter in order to craft various items, ranging from potions that could be used to recover party members' health during battles, to cushions that could be used to rest at various broken down rest stops in the world. There are other locations that can be used for resting to recover health and MP without the need for cushions, but it seems like these cushions are specifically for the rest areas that can be found while exploring in the wild. These rest areas may be useful in taking on the various combat assignments that can be found in the world. In the region I had access to, there were 4 different markers that indicated where I could take part in specific battles. There are various enemies roaming in the world, but these combat assignments are a bit different when compared to normal battles, and they only seem to activate after entering a marked area. Once in the specified area, I had to defeat enemies within the time limit while trying to complete the additional sub-objectives. While fighting these enemies, I noticed that someone over voice comms called Mai would provide additional tips and ecological information about the creatures I was facing. Based on what Mai said during these assignments, I assumed that we'll need to complete them in order to collect data for her, since after completing one of these assignments, I obtained rare fiend data, which seems to contribute towards increasing some kind of data score for that region. It may not be directly related to exploration, but while progressing through the story, there was a puzzle that needed to be completed before I could progress. The one that I had to do was fairly simple, but I assume that we'll be seeing more things like this as we progress through the storyline, and possibly while exploring the world. Based on what I played, the exploration and the general gameplay within the world are a huge improvement over the mainly linear environments in Remake. There's still a bit of time until release, so there are a few things that need to be ironed out, like the accuracy of picking up smaller items off the ground, like materia. And using the terrain actions didn't always lead to the outcome I was expecting. I was hoping that the explorable areas would have some more roaming enemies too. There were a few small packs of orcs that I ran into, and I could always go to the combat assignments if I wanted to fight, but the world did feel pretty predictable. I only explored a tiny portion of the map, so it's still too soon for me to judge, but I'm hoping that there will be things within the world that will actually surprise me and interest me enough to distract me from the clearly marked objectives on the map. So we'll just have to see how things go at release. It's not just the exploration that's seen some changes though. There are also a few updates to the way we can customize our characters. Rebirth still retains a lot of the customization options that were introduced in Remake, but it expands on them and introduces more ways for people to customize their party. The customization mainly revolves around a character's weapon, armor, accessory, and their equipped materia. Just like in Remake, the weapons that characters obtain will have abilities attached to them that can be used in combat. If things work the same way as they do in Remake, to start off with, you'll only be able to use these abilities while you have their specific weapon equipped. But if you continue to raise the proficiency of a weapon's ability, you can eventually master it, which will bind the ability to the character, allowing them to use it while they have any other weapon equipped. Weapons also have materia slots that can be used to customize a character even further. Materia can be slotted into a character's equipment, and they can provide a character with new abilities, spells, and passive bonuses. Once you obtain enough AP after battles, materia can level up, which improves their performance or unlocks higher tiers of their abilities. Equipment can also contain linked materia slots, which allows one materia to impact the performance of another. While playing, I managed to find the comet materia while exploring one of the areas. After looking around a bit more, I also found the level boost materia, so I decided to combine them. I placed the level boost materia in one part of the linked materia slot, while the comet materia was placed in the other. And this gave me access to the Cometeor spell before I even leveled up the comet materia, giving me access to a powerful spell much earlier than usual. When I used Cometeor on a boss, it was an easy way for me to overcome one of the phases where it hides on the cave ceiling to avoid my melee attacks. It was said that many new materia with new abilities not seen in the first game are available as well, so players will have even more options to customize and build character loadouts to their own taste. So it does seem like we'll have a lot of room for experimentation when it comes to materia, especially when certain materias can contain multiple effects at once, like the lightning and wind materia that gives you access to both lightning and wind magic in a single materia. A character's armor can also contain materia slots, which increases the amount of customization options you have. And characters can also equip accessories too. These don't seem to have materia slots, but instead they can provide characters with specific stat enhancements or other useful passive traits. And I didn't get to see it while playing myself, but a skill tree system was also implemented that unlocks new combat related abilities for additional character growth. In addition to all the customization options for individual characters, there are also ways to customize your whole party. While out of combat, it's possible to seamlessly switch between preset party compositions. This can be done quickly by opening the command menu and pressing either L1 or R1. This version of the game had 3 preset teams that were available, but in the final game, we'll be able to freely customize our preset parties, including their equipment and materia. So you can build parties that have different specialities. Which takes me to the combat in the game. Based on what I played, Square Enix has overhauled and fleshed out a lot of the combat systems since Remake. Now the combat feels much more involved, and each character in the party has a more defined role and purpose. There were even times where I had to completely unlearn what I knew about Remake, since there were certain things about the gameplay that are just completely different now. The biggest change being the synergy skills and the synergy abilities. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth uses a command menu based action combat system. Each character has a basic attack combo that they can freely use to deal damage to enemies. But in order to activate various commands like abilities, spells, or even items, you need to consume a resource known as an ATB charge. You can store up to 2 charges at a time, and depending on how powerful a command is, they can cost either 1 or 2 charges to activate. The ATB gauge will gradually fill on its own over time, but landing attacks is what makes it charge even faster. You can access a character's commands in the command menu. Opening this menu during combat will activate tactical mode, which slows down time, giving you the chance to select the necessary commands without any pressure. But if you don't want to interrupt the pace of combat, you can also set these commands to shortcuts, so that the commands you set can be used without needing to constantly open the command menu. Certain characters and abilities can also be used to fight while in midair. In Final Fantasy VII Remake, characters like Cloud and Tifa would automatically jump towards flying enemies to attack them. It had its uses, but you were better off just switching to another character that could use ranged attacks, or you could use some kind of magic to make the enemies fall to the ground. But in Rebirth, I'm happy to say that the aerial combat has been completely overhauled. At first, I still assumed that I would need to automatically jump towards the enemies when using Cloud or Tifa, so I struggled for a while and just kept swinging my weapon in the air while wondering why my characters wouldn't jump. I didn't find anything like a dedicated button for jumping during combat, but after experimenting, I did eventually learn what I needed to do. Now you have to be more deliberate with your intention to attack enemies that are flying. You can use characters like Barret and Aerith to use range attacks, but if you want to use a melee focused character, then it needs to be someone that can actually use aerial attacks. Red 13 is a ground-based melee fighter, but characters like Cloud, Tifa, and Sephiroth were more flexible and could be used to fight enemies in mid-air when I found a method to get them off the ground. Instead of having a normal evade, Sephiroth warps to avoid attacks, and this warp can also be used to move him towards distant targets, even if they're in mid-air. So that was a way to launch him towards flying enemies so he could perform air combos. For other characters, you need to be a bit more inventive, like taking advantage of the newly implemented synergy skills. While holding down the guard button, you'll be able to team up with party members to use a variety of synergy skills. These skills can be used freely since they don't consume any ATB charges, and the skills that are available will be different depending on the character that's been actively controlled. When controlling Tifa with Cloud in the party, for example, she can use a synergy skill Soaring Flurry, which issues a command to Cloud to use his sword to launch Tifa into the air. Once she's in the air, she can then continue to perform aerial combos and use abilities against flying enemies. She can also use her ability Reverse Gale to launch herself off the ground or knock flying enemies back down, so she's almost able to perform just as well as she can on the ground while she's in mid-air. But that's not the only synergy system in Rebirth. Along with synergy skills, synergy abilities were introduced. As characters continue to expend ATB charges during combat, they will gain synergy charges, which are indicated by the small synergy charge icons below the ATB gauge. When two characters have enough synergy charges stored, they can activate their synergy abilities. These abilities deal a huge amount of damage and can give characters unique buffs, like increasing limit break levels or granting unlimited MP for a specific period of time, or even extending the duration that enemies are staggered for. It's been said that more abilities will unlock as we increase the party level and deepen the affinity between party members. I didn't get to see a menu related to party levels while playing, so I guess it's something we'll have to look forward to once the game releases. Any characters in the party that are not being currently controlled will fight automatically during combat, and it's possible to order your party members to use specific commands if enough of their ATB gauge has been filled. It's also possible to switch to other party members and take control of them directly. Synergy abilities really encourage issuing commands or switching to other party members to use their ATB charges, since they don't seem to use their abilities on their own unless they're configured to do so through materia. Certain enemies and bosses also reinforce the need to switch characters during combat by using attacks that bind or restrict your currently controlled character. If I got caught by these attacks, I would need to switch characters and attack specific parts of the enemy's body, or destroy a trap to break them free. All of these new systems that required cooperation between party members made it feel like my party was actually fighting as a team, and it made me want to actually switch to the other characters and use them properly, rather than just issuing commands to them. Each character feels like they have more of a real purpose for use during combat, and it adds another layer to the current evolution of the Final Fantasy VII combat system. Each character also has a unique ability that helps to set them apart from the other characters in the party. For example, with Sephiroth's unique ability, he can build his aura charge by landing basic attacks on enemies, but if he's stunned by an attack, this charge will be depleted. Once it's fully charged, he can use branching combo finishes depending on the previous action used, which can rapidly fill his limit gauge. And once his limit gauge is filled, he can use his Octa/Prime limit break. Limit breaks are a character's ultimate ability. Taking damage and staggering enemies is usually what fills a character's limit gauge, and once their gauge is full, it can be consumed to activate their limit break. These abilities are powerful and they don't consume any ATB charges, so they can be used freely to get out of dangerous situations or to deal a large amount of damage in a short space of time. It's also possible to take advantage of enemy weaknesses to put them into a staggered state that leaves them vulnerable to attacks. As you continue to deal damage to enemies or exploit their weaknesses, you can put them into a pressured state. Continuing to hit enemies with magic and abilities while they're pressured will rapidly fill their stagger gauge, which is located under their health bar. Once the stagger gauge is filled, they'll be knocked off balance, and you can deal increased damage to them until they recover. While playing, there were some enemies that I had to be more aggressive with and intentionally force them into a staggered state. since if I gave them the opportunity, they would blow me away and begin healing themselves. So taking advantage of the stagger system was useful, since I had to defeat those enemies before a countdown timer ended. Based on the latest trailer for Rebirth, it seems like we'll be able to use summons again too. I'm not sure if we can freely use these summons whenever we want, or if they can only be used in specific situations like in Remake. But based on a recent interview, we should expect to see more summons than in the previous game. And it was also said that there will be side content that revolves around a summon that wasn't featured in the original Final Fantasy VII. Even though we won't be able to carry over our save data from Final Fantasy VII Remake, Square Enix recently announced that if we have save data for Remake on our PlayStation 5 systems, we will unlock the Leviathan summon for Rebirth. And people that also have save data from the Intermission DLC will unlock Ramuh as a summon too. So in Rebirth, we'll still have something to show that we played the previous game. After trying Rebirth, I was already looking forward to playing it once it released, but it was the recent trailer that somehow made me want to play it even more than I already did. Rebirth seems like it will have an interesting world to explore with a lot of activities that longtime fans and newcomers can enjoy, and it's said to contain nearly 100 hours of adventure. But as good as the side content and the exploration aspects of the game seem to be, we'll have to see if they can succeed with the way they've chosen to retell a story that was and is loved by many fans. But overall, I'm really looking forward to Rebirth, and I can't wait to start experimenting with character builds and exploring the world once it releases in February. I'll be making some new videos for upcoming action games and RPGs, so remember to subscribe if you want to be the first to know when those videos are available. If you want to stay up to date with everything I'm doing in between videos, then keep an eye on the YouTube community tab or follow me on social media. I'll put the links to everywhere you can find me in the description. I'll be making some new videos very soon, but until I make those videos, here's another that you might find interesting.